Hi everybody, thanks for tuning in. I'm trying to get my camera at a good angle. I have a lot to go over regarding a meditation I did I've done a couple meditations. I put some notes on the back burner. I didn't get to everything, and so it's one of those things where this is kind of like a scrapbook of every single thought or idea that came to my mind during meditations over the last few days. So it's going to look like a mishposh, a hodgepodge, a mix of various different things. If people want to do another Q&A about how I meditate, so for people who want to learn the technique, we can do another Q&A, or to answer any basic questions about stuff I either didn't get to or things that people weren't clear about in some of the meditations I've done in the past. Questions, I know a lot of people are working hard to try and perfect the heart-centered remote viewing technique themselves, and so I know that a lot of people are asking questions. People are also asking about classes, and if I teach classes, and how much do I charge. I teach here on this channel, and we get a lot done I think we'll get a lot done during the Q&As if I do the live streaming for some of the students. I know there's a lot of professional readers, people that are trying to become professional empaths. I have no problem offering free sharing about the technique I use. I only request that charity be donated to organizations that go to help children at the border and foster kids. And I always give a link below the videos if people want to get involved with all of that. So the knowledge is free, the teachings are free. We only ask that people give to charity. So that's what's going on there. So the first thing I want to talk about is last night's meditation and why I think that Epstein is working out some kind of a deal, even though he pled not guilty. When I meditate on what is going on in Europe, when I meditate on what was going on with the intelligence agencies in the United States, when I meditate on an ongoing investigation and the fact that Robert Mueller was interviewing Michael Cohen, and Michael Cohen had a lot of private information and witnessed certain crimes, this is the story that I start to construct in my brain. And then if people think I've got the story wrong, or if they have something more to contribute, absolutely, let's have that conversation. So here is how my brain is putting it together during the meditations. It looks like when Robert Mueller began to interview Michael Cohen about crimes, some of the crimes that were confessed to by Michael Cohen involved this illegal activities, money laundering schemes, offshore bank accounts, crimes against children, etc. Anytime he had information like that or documents like that, he would give them directly to the feds. He would give them directly to Robert Mueller, and then Robert Mueller had them organized and then passed on to teams that already had open files. So some of the files that were open included international investigations into money laundering, and that involved countries in Eastern Europe. So they were laundering money, and they were hiding the money in cryptocurrencies, and we talked about that in previous remotes. So all this illegal money laundering was going on, all this bribing was going on, and it was being sent back and forth via this cryptocurrency. And one of the crimes also being monitored was child sex trafficking and child sex trafficking. And so when we started picking up stuff about British intelligence, and the British were coming, the British were monitoring the cryptocurrency, they were monitoring bribes, they were monitoring money laundering and how offshore shell accounts, etc. But they were also with Interpol monitoring sex trafficking, child pornography. They'd been doing a lot of that. And so there were a lot of high profile arrests coming out of England that the British intelligence were involved with. Kevin Spacey was under investigation in Britain because the British were monitoring him. Weinstein was agreed to surrender after leaving England. So there was cooperation going on. How it looked when I stood back and tried to put the pieces together, it just looks like British intelligence, Interpol, and the United States had been monitoring these types of activities for a really, really long time, and they were sharing intelligence. So Epstein was in France. I don't know, I haven't been able to find out how long he was in France, but if we can follow the pieces of the puzzle, it looks like more than likely he agreed to surrender. That's the most likely scenario. If you step back objectively and you look at the fact that there's this international crime ring with money laundering and slavery, etc., and that Interpol, British intelligence, the Americans are all monitoring the sex trafficking, etc., it makes sense that if Epstein was in France, they would have to negotiate extradition because France won't extradite necessarily. So it goes back to that whole idea of France's relationship with Russia, France's relationship with Iran, France feeling like they're being forced to give up some of their Frenchness in order to be part of the EU. And Epstein is in France. So I think that there was a heads up. People in the know knew that Epstein was about to surrender, and I think he flew back to New Jersey and surrendered to police and allowed himself to be arrested. And the reason why I think that there was a heads up is because 3 to 4 days prior to Epstein's arrest, things began to shift in the media. The most dramatic shift has been on Fox News, where they're slowly beginning to not renew certain contracts. I think that's what we're going to start seeing on Fox News. Certain people will be sent bye-bye and probably will not be coming back to Fox. And Fox is replacing some of the more extreme people with more moderates. It's interesting what happened when I remote viewed the Disney merger, because Disney was not supposed to take over Fox News. It was supposed to take over Fox, but then Fox News was going to be independent. But when I went into that and when I started reading the news and meditating on it, it looked like it was some kind of a takeover where progressives and liberals and people that were invested in Disney, they didn't like the Fox platform, and investors were pulling out and they were losing money, and Murdoch was investigated by the Australians. They've investigated him since 2012. That's the official line, is since 2012. And Papadopoulos, Australian intelligence was monitoring him. So there's this overlap. We know Fox, I think they got banned in Europe, and they might have been banned in England, correct me if I'm wrong, because of, again, British intelligence coming in. The Australians monitoring this activity. And since everything is connected, Julian Assange also is floating around doing deals, taking cryptocurrency, also being monitored by the Australian intelligence agencies and the British intelligence agencies. So everything's connected. So that's what Mueller did. He handed over what he was getting from Michael Cohen to those people in the FBI and intelligence agencies that already had open files on these cases. And I believe what happened was when Epstein was in France, there was some kind of formal agreement that he would return to the United States and would surrender. That's what I think happened. Now, I could be wrong, but it just seems like that's what we're looking at, in which case he probably knew what the charges were going to be before he got back to the States. And people close to the president and people who knew this was brewing, the people close to the situation probably had a heads up that Epstein would be in custody a couple days before. That's just how it feels energetically. It didn't come out of the blue. This was something that had been planned for a long time. They say Epstein fought. Well, maybe he thought it would be a more friendly arrest, but I think he knew. I think he knew coming into Jersey that this was going to happen. So I think they've unsealed his indictment, but this is also what happened with Weinstein. When Weinstein agreed to turn himself in, he flew back from London, and a similar kind of situation happens. And in agreement to cooperate, they might withhold certain charges. So that seems to be what's going on with Epstein. So Epstein, when we did a remote viewing on Epstein, he, according to what I was feeling or picking up, he said he had 400 names, which would be of special interest to the DA's office. Now, I have to say something. I have to preface something by saying that when he spoke, when we did a remote viewing and we had Epstein come in, he said something about compromising people that were involved with the New York police commissioner. So that was new information for me, and that wasn't in the press. So it's just something for us to, put a pin in it and try and figure out why we heard that. What was he talking about when he talked about bribing or compromising the New York police commissioners? That was new information. So that's kind of how it looks. It looks like it was part of an international sting operation. It looks like people had a heads up it was happening, and it looks like in some way Epstein knew he was going to be nabbed. So that is the first remote that I wanted to talk about. I also want to throw cards on it and take a look at the future of Epstein, but it looks like he's probably going to get some kind of a deal worked out. Now, in terms of Barr's job, if you realize that somebody can't do the job, if you realize that they're a security risk, if you realize that they are steadily declining in mental health and they're the president of the free world, how do you extradite? How do you end this relationship? How do you land the plane? Well, you land it very carefully and you land it very slowly. And if the child is dangerous, you take the weapons away slowly, one weapon at a time. It was interesting that people had asked about Kellyanne Conway, because when I go into her energy, her perception of herself and her worldview is very different than how the media portrays her. And again, it's one of those things where we sometimes are biased when we look at ourselves versus how others see us. And Kellyanne Conway sees herself as this unbelievably compassionate person who's just so worried about her friend Donald Trump, and she can't leave the White House because her friend is melting down and needs her. This is her perception. And so she's often the one assigned to be the adult babysitter in the room, particularly now that his symptoms are getting worse and worse and worse. So who gets stuck when everybody else wants to go home, and when the boys want to go home and get some sleep? Who's stuck on parent duty until 2-3 in the morning? Kellyanne Conway. And so it's become this joke that they're like, you'll take it from here, right, Kellyanne? And everybody leaves to go to sleep, and then she's stuck complaining that she has to stay there because he needs her until 2-3 in the morning while he tweets, and Kellyanne doesn't get to go home. So what do? Your husband, who loves you, who sees this wonderful compassionate side of you that nobody else sees, starts leaking stories to the general press about just how mentally unstable the president is. And perhaps Kellyanne wants it to happen because she's genuinely worried about him. She's worried about the country. She's worried about this administration. But I don't get the impression there's any desire on her part to be vindictive. It was just, I'm worried about him. I can't keep doing this. I'm exhausted. I can't be, everybody keeps expecting me to stick around and do adult daycare, which is actually what she said on the record. But what it feels like is like she really does worry about him. The two other meditations I want to talk about today, I'll get into after I throw cards. I'm going to do Epstein first, and then I'm going to talk about two other remotes that came in that I think are fairly interesting. One regards talking to a soldier who's stationed, it looks like, in Iraq. I want to talk about him because that was interesting. It was an experiment to try and connect with soldiers in Iraq. And then the third remote, which is something I'm going to teach people how to do in the future when you're doing your remote viewing, it's how you connect with your higher self. I jokingly call my higher self the Oracle of Whimsy. I don't really think I'm an oracle. But you can call your higher self whatever you like. And it's just a way of connecting to the part of you that can sit back objectively and look at a situation, your Buddha nature. So that's the section of the brain I work with when I'm trying to stand back and remote myself and look at things from a bigger picture. All right, let's go ahead and check on Epstein. But yeah, it looked like he knew he was going to be arrested and there was some kind of an agreement. He knew what he was going to be charged with, but there was an opportunity to negotiate with the feds for so that he would not face. He's in serious trouble, and Barr could not stop this from happening. The only thing that Barr can do is slow down the train crash so that this is as smooth a landing as possible. And he's an arch conservative, so of course he's going to help Mitch McConnell. Of course he's going to help the conservatives push their conservative agenda. But this train crash, this plane is crashing. So when he and Rosenstein, who knew that people close to the president were complaining about his mental health as early as 3 years ago, it's an open secret that the people working for this administration feel that that he is mentally ill and becoming progressively worse. So you bring in somebody that the president thinks he can trust, and then that person lands the plane, and you hopefully get the individual out of there before any more serious damage is caused. That's how it looks. You can't stop impeachment, but you can slow it down. All right, let's take a look at Epstein. What's going to be with Epstein? Is Epstein going to make a deal? The base of the matter regarding Epstein: walking away from a battle he can't win results in the star. So yeah, he's going to make a deal. You can see star energy moving in to receive an anointing or a blessing, walking away from a battle. The battle keeps going on and on and on, and it never ends. And if you look at the remote we did on Epstein 6 months ago, he said this hell will never end. So from his perspective, it's a hell that never ends. From his perspective, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. Where he's at right now, he's out money. You can see here 4 of Pentacles. It's talked a lot about this. First off, he's got to pay the lawyers. Secondly, he's got to pay the victims. We had talked about this in the past, that he's going to be bankrupted from this. Confiscation of money, missing money, questions about where he got his money. We can see frugality card is moving in. 4 of Pentacles. He wants a wish regarding lovers. It's all about trying to get a sweet deal, right? The Lovers cards is about negotiations, partnerships. The Wish card is above it. He's hoping that he's going to get a sweet deal. He feels that he has information that is of value to the prosecution. It's all about the deal. It's all about saving money. It's all about payoffs regarding previous cases. The law is coming in. It's all about paying victims, bribes, the legal cost. The thief tries to flee. He's going to try and get out of this, or try. For him, it's the drag of prison. And oh, interesting. Unfortunately for Epstein, he's not only facing charges in the United States, he's facing international charges. You can see the World card moving in, confusion. He suffers from mental health challenges and possibly drug or alcohol abuse as well with a moon card here. Death with a justice card moving in, money going out, the thief. You can see a world card, the fact that I think that he most likely surrendered in the United States. I think that they knew what was going on. I think that there's no way this could have happened without us communicating with Interpol, and which is based in France. There's no way that this arrest took place and international intelligence wasn't given a heads up beforehand. But the fact that there's a world card here also leads me to think that we could extradite him back to Europe, or he could be questioned in Europe, or already was questioned in Europe prior to being sent to the United States, where I am convinced he knew he was going to be arrested or nabbed. Maybe he didn't know he was going to be nabbed at that point, but he knew what was coming. People had asked whether or not any of the victims had been interviewed. I know that the woman who alleges to have been Donald Trump's victim was in Britain. She was interviewed by some of the press. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist if there's an international crime investigation going on with Interpol, British intelligence in the United States, where they're following the money on sex trafficking, the black market, drugs, cryptocurrency, that she would have been questioned by British police, and that's pretty much what I saw. And so, yeah, I think but the problem, again, is bigger than Donald Trump. This is an international crime rink with bribes, money hid in banks and then used to bribe people. As I had said in previous remotes, it looked like they were taking money from criminal activities and then using that money to bribe people of interest. So that's the international crime rink that you go into. It's interesting also to see Australia and Britain, the United States and Interpol working together. Australia has been looking at Rupert Murdoch for a while. They've been looking at WikiLeaks for quite a while. The fact that was why they gave a heads up to Papadopoulos, the Australians with the British, just how closely they have been monitoring this situation for a very, very long time. And I think that the dominoes went out one at a time. They stayed on the investigation, and they slowly, one by one, started bringing people in, starting with the smallest person making deals into the largest, until eventually they started getting the big fish like Epstein. So I want to talk briefly now about a couple of other visions or ideas that came to me during the remote. The first I want to talk about is something which is called the Southern Renaissance. I don't know why I don't see the notes here, but there was a vision. Oh, here it is. The Southern Renaissance. We're going to start seeing, if we haven't begun to see it already, something that looks like a Southern Renaissance. And that is this beautiful spirit that's going to start to take over the South. And it's going to be expressed in the art and the culture and the literature and the music of the South. So it's like the South is going to be free of slavery, finally. It's how slavery has really destroyed the South. It's been the scourge of the South, and it has hidden the beautiful soul and the spirit of the South, because when you do things that are bad, when you do things that go against the natural order, like slavery, all the beautiful, wonderful potential that's there is hidden by this toxic, horrible thing that's going on. So what we're starting to see in response to that is something that I call the Southern Renaissance. And so the new Southern strategy is this thing called the Southern Renaissance. And the Southern Renaissance will be a birth of, we'll really start to see an explosion of art and music. And the areas to be paying attention to are great music coming out of Kentucky. Yay, Kentucky. Great music coming out of Tennessee. Texas. So we're going to be seeing music, the Renaissance really starting to take up in Austin and parts of Texas. It's really going to explode over there, more to the world than just staying in Austin. Same with Tennessee. We're going to see the birth of some amazing music coming out of Nashville and Tennessee that's having a really profound effect on people's spirituality. And the same is true with Kentucky bluegrass, Louisiana, of course, always the home of amazing music, spirituality. But what was amazing about this remote viewing was to see how this soul is calling out to the rest of the world through this genre of music in the South. And so music, poetry, art, Georgia, which is known for its art communities, North Carolina, South Carolina, just this, start having your feelers open for this beautiful energy and music and art to come emerging from the South in the middle of all of this horrible. And it's almost going to be like a beacon bringing people back to their authentic selves in a language that the people in those communities can understand. Also, I think Buttigieg is going to continue to become popular within the Christian community and in the Blue Dog community. I know, as I said before, he's very popular on Fox, and he's going to be part of that renaissance of returning back to this kind of beautiful, poetic, artistic, musical traditions without the prejudice. So that's one of the exciting things that we're going to start seeing, is the emerging of a really cool South. The South will rise again, but it'll be a very different type of a South that's going to be rising. So that's the story of how Buttigieg is helping to bridge the gap. And it's also the story of how we're seeing a more loving energy move in. People had asked about the transformation that's taking place at Fox News. Yeah, Fox News is definitely changing. I think that Disney, like I said, came in, their investors got angry, and they wanted to go back to being a nice little quaint news station that talks about things that make people feel good. So, like I said, contracts will not be renewed, and that's the direction that Fox is headed. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the soldier's story. And this is a meditation I did where I attempted in the meditative state to connect with the soldiers, as I did in a previous remote with the family that was going to the July 4th celebrations in DC. When I meditated on this and I saw what my mind could come up with, I was drawn to a soldier who appears to have been based in Iraq. It's a young man. He says that he's from Nebraska, and there wasn't a lot of work where he was at. His family has a small farm in Nebraska, and when money was tight and there wasn't work, he joined the army. He joined the military, and he wound up stationed in Iraq. He suffers from depression. He also feels that he was too young to be making the decisions he made, that his family needed money, and he was put into a situation where he had to make all kinds of serious decisions he didn't feel equipped to make. He said he has a younger brother who's also thinking about joining the army because it's been a lot of rain in Nebraska and the farm flooded again. So he wanted to connect to us to let people know that this is the plight of the small farmers in the Midwest, that many of them have children who've joined the military, and this is really the death of the farmers. That many of them are become depressed, they become suicidal because they're not earning enough money as soldiers to help out with the family farm. When they do have leave or when they can come, they do try to help as best they can. They send as much money as they can, but unfortunately it's becoming apparent to him that many of these farms can't be saved, and the soldiers who go out to fight are traumatized because they're doing this to help their families as best they can, and it never seems to be enough. So if people are looking to be involved with helping stop the suicide rates, which are high amongst soldiers, this was just one soldier talking about his story, about the fact that the Nebraska farm flooded this week, and about how his younger brother now, on the one hand, can't leave the farm, on the other hand, because the situation is so dire, is considering joining the military as well. So those are all of the remotes that happened the last, I didn't get to one, and that was Mitch McConnell. I'll talk about that a little later, but basically Mitch McConnell came in, and yeah, we'll talk about that another time. All right, thanks for watching, everyone. If you're still trying to get in for readings, you can find the information below this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Peace out. Bye-bye.